Thank you, Mr. President, and distinguished colleagues both here in the chamber and participating in today's proceedings remotely. As you know, Mr. President, this bill is part of a package of bills that we are proceeding with in the last couple of days that are intended to begin to address the enormous crisis that is facing our state, and that is the crisis of people unable to pay their housing costs as a result of, through no fault of their own, loss of jobs and loss of income during this COVID-19 pandemic. We passed a bill yesterday that is intended to deal with mortgages, to give forbearance there. We've passed a bill that is to ensure that people's utilities and services don't get cut off during the pandemic. We've passed a bill to allow local governments to address property tax payments and delay those and give forbearance to property taxpayers. And today we're talking about renters. And we are beginning today with a bill that is significant in its own right, but very modest relative to the needs. This bill, the Emergency Rent Relief Act of 2020, will make $100 million available immediately to address some of our renters who are most facing the greatest hardship. It is a program that will pay rent for April, May, June, and July to the extent that people who were low income both before this crisis and during this crisis are burdened by their rent, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income in rent. Of course, if you have no income during this period, the program would pay your full rent. Otherwise, it would pay the difference between 30% of your rent and the income, 30% of your income rather, and the rent that you need to pay. It is intended to signal to tenants that we are serious about addressing this crisis, and we're serious about addressing it by figuring out a way to pay the rent. Having said that, I want to acknowledge today that it is a first step. It is not sufficient. Many of us have joined together to call for $100 billion in rental assistance from the federal government nationwide, which would break down to $10 billion for New York. That is 100 times the amount of money we're talking about today, and that would allow us to pass a much broader, comprehensive approach to this problem. I'm happy to report that the House of Representatives have passed just such a bill that would put that $100 billion available for renters. It also has $75 billion for homeowners and about $20 billion about $12 billion rather, for homeless services. In order to provide that assistance, we begin today by passing this limited bill, but we do hope to come back over the next few weeks, hopefully with some good news from Washington. And I urge everybody within earshot of this broadcast to continue to advocate for that kind of need from Washington. And I stand ready with my colleagues to ensure that that money gets into the hands of all the tenants in our state. It's our hope that this package will begin to address that, but we have a lot more work to do. So without further ado, I vote aye, Mr. President.